Hey guys, Austen Mengler here. I'm a concept artist and illustrator from Perth, and I thought I'd show you my digital process Photoshop walkthrough of the Photoshop file for this guy. He's called Slasherbutt, and it was a necromorph redesign based on the game Dead Space. And I'll go through and show you all the different layers that I've painted here. So here's the finished one. And then I'll go all the way back. Here's all the layers, taking off all the different steps. Oops, I think I took too many off there. Alrighty, so here's the first thing. This is the pencil sketch that I scanned into Photoshop. I usually scan them at 600 dpi just because I can. It's why not scan at the highest resolution possible. Usually print medium prints at 300 dpi, so I figure if I can scan it at 600, an A4 or a A5 sketch, scan it at 600, then when you blow it up a bit bigger, it probably won't you won't notice any pixelation because it's such a high resolution scan. So here's the pencil sketch of the slasher. It's just with a few 2B shading. Probably took about like 15-20 minutes for the sketch. And then in Photoshop I always use a levels layer. So instead of applying levels directly to the file here on the layer, I like to make a modify layer. So instead of, I can just, because then if I want to change it around, change the order or anything, I can just do that instantly like that, instead of having, applied it to the pencils where then I wouldn't have the ability to edit it afterwards. So, yep, I've just edited the pencils. You can see here, you can make it darker or lighter. This one here controls the darkest bits. This one here is the midtones. And then this one here is the highlights. But yeah, I always just bump up the contrast a bit, and then just to make it read better. Some people do like have a really rough pencil sketch, and then they'll do digital line work. But I find for organic work like this, it's not a problem because you can it adds a lot of texture. And it adds a lot of, kind of skin, kind of funky textures that you want on organic monster work. So, and it's quite a big image. Like, here's the original size. Like, this is how big it's actually. And you can see it's not very clear. But when you do it to a printable size, it will look alright. And it will just add a bit of texture there with the pencil shading. And then here, this next step is just a normal layer, and I've just added bits of white to get rid of some of the scraps from the scanning. So now what I'll do is I'll make a multiply folder. So you make a new folder, this button here, and then you just set it to multiply. And what multiply does is that any color that you paint with, it won't interfere with any of the dark, and it will just go onto the white. So you see there how I'm just using my mouse at the moment, but it's not going over the top of the pencil sketch as it would if you have it on a normal layer like this. So it's just a great way to get like some block colors down. So here I've spent quite a while on this one here. So that's just the silhouette, and I find it's easier to spend a bit of time doing the silhouette because then all the colors within the monster or the creature or character or whatever you want, they're all contained within the silhouette. So you see here, now I've added a bit of blood and a bit of different coloration, and it's still very, not incredibly big range. It's just about 3 or 4 different tones. But what I've done is I've put it on a layer lock, which is this one, and then what that does is, you know, it locks all the transparent pixels so that once you've made a silhouette, you can lock it, and then any painting you do, it'll only be within the areas that you've already painted. So you see, if I did it now, like, and painted right across, it just makes it so that it touches on the already painted bits. And then if I take it off, it'll go all over the place. So it's just a great way to be able to, you know, keep your silhouette strong and keep all the color within the thing. So here I'm just adding a bit more value to the piece. I've got just a layer of just white stuff. I find it's always good to keep everything on a separate layer. Just think, you never know what you'll want to change later. And then this last one, I don't think that's anything. Okay, so after I've done this block color layer, I find it's like my painting style for digital is a lot like painting a miniature would be. I used to do a lot of Warhammer model collecting and painting and have a lot of fun with that. So, and with, you know, painting traditional models and, you know, as it would be with a canvas, you have to start from the back and move forward. And I mean by that is you have to start with like dark colors or, you know, flat block colors, and then you start editing them and bring the highlights on the top. So my next step will be making an overlay layer. So it's quite a subtle change there. This is only 18% transparency. If I boost this back up to 100%, you can see there all the different like hues that I've just added. So what I like, you know, I have blue for the shadows and yellow for the highlights, and they're very like you know, complementary colors. You know, all the movie posters are kind of like orange and blue kind of thing. Those tropes that are going around. But I find that having it just at 18% adds a little bit more warmth and cool to the mix. So that's just an overlay layer, which means that it's kind of like a dye that affects all the different colors. It's not like, you know, and then if I went back to 100% and made it a normal layer, it'd be like that. So it's very messy, and I've used splattery kind of brushes to apply it so that it's more of a natural effect. And yeah, what I always do as well is, you see this history layer here, this window. It's a great way to retrace your steps if you want, and like if you make a mistake, you can just go back up like that. It's a bit like you know, easier way of doing Control Z, because Control Z only goes one step. Anyway, I should probably get on. There's a lot of layers here, isn't there? So mostly they're all mostly just different details as well. So these first ones are more important. So yeah, then after the shading kind of wash layer, I guess you could call it, I've got just some shadows that I'm putting down. So here's, you know, you can see it's just added a bit more of the form. And then here you know, this is when I'm finally starting to paint onto the over the top of all this base work. So this is all kind of base work, and it looks a bit messy, but you'll see how it's a lot easier to start painting once you have a lot of, you know, previous work done. So, you know, I did the pencil sketch, which was my first kind of base, I guess you could say, so that I know exactly what I want to do. And then I've put in all the main colors and all that, and some of the form, and now I'm going to start going in and painting a bit more details and stuff. So here I've added some blue on the side, just to add a bit of color. You know, human skin it doesn't actually have a color, it's just like, you know, mostly transparent, and you know, it has a lot of different colors in it, and so it's you know, important to add a bit of that into the mix when you're doing, you know, painting. You know, kind of how light isn't like just one, like skin isn't just one color, it's just like reflective, depends on the reflective light and all that as well. I don't know. I'm kind of stumbling over my words, but I hope you know what I mean. But yeah, and then I'm adding a bit of bone color here to some of the sights, and here I'm just adding a bit more of the separation to the strong silhouette. And then this one here, just a little detail there. Probably didn't need its own layer, but oh well. And so all this stuff is on its own group, and then this is put in with the base colors. And I think, yeah, so here's the layer mask. And this was just to tidy up the silhouette even more. So I've put everything below in a group and then applied a layer mask to it. And layer masks just allow you to kind of erase everything as a whole and then keep the sections that you erased hidden instead of deleting them permanently. So you see, if I disable layer mask there, it gets rid of the mask and then I can see what's underneath. But if I apply it again, it just hides those little bits. And that's a great way to kind of just keep it all tidy. So now I've added a very basic shading kind of shadow here on this layer. And what I do with that is I'll just make a gradient circle like this. So I'll just get rid of this guy temporarily. So if you add a circle like this, and this is just with a really low opacity, about 36% or 20% or something. It's probably a basic way to do it. And then what you do is you free transform, which if you want, you can go edit, free transform, or Control T. And then what you do is you just squash it down a bit and edit, transform, perspective. And then that makes it so you can make it look like it's coming towards you or going away. And then depending on where your figure is, you want to edit the shadow compared to that, and then you can drop down the opacity a little bit. So that's just a tool I use. There's the basic shadow, and then what I'll do again is do another one, but I'll do it with a texture brush so that it's more textured, and it gives a little bit of sense of texture to the boring background that I love to do for my work. I mean, I'm trying to focus more on characters and more on design of the characters and monsters. And obviously putting them in an environment would be ideal, but for just a quick concept like this, and just for work that's more concept art related, sometimes in the early stages, all you need is it's great to see how the silhouette works of the character, and so a white background or just a blank kind of minimal background works well. I know that a lot of the time, clients will want to see it put into an environment, but I think as this is just for me, it's more fun just to explore the initial concept of the character, and then if this was for a project, I could then later put it into a environment and paint up the background later. So now that we've got the shadow in like that, I'll just have a look here. Alrighty, so here's some of my some Photoshop trickery. So I'm adding some mist and some what's the word? Some distance between the back arm here, this one, and the body. Pretty messy with that mouse. So all I did there was add a white layer, add a bit of white very softly with an airbrush, and then turn it down to about 50%. Because things in the background look a lot less contrasty than things in the foreground, and you can really make the foreground pop by having things in the background more blanked out. So here I'm just painting more of the arm. There's a lot of, these are all just detail layers, I think. And then here I'm just adding a bit more painting towards the silhouette. I'm just painting white onto the background on a new layer. It's, if I was more organized when doing my own personal paintings, I'd yeah, it's something I need to, practice more, is, getting the whole hierarchy of layers working. I generally just go with the flow and see how it goes. But if I was working for a client, and, sometimes you do, where you work for a job and then they'll want you to keep the, keep the character or the figure or monster on a separate layer completely so that you could edit it later or put in a background or put it all over the place. Then you might want to spend a bit more time organizing your layers, making sure that instead of painting on a separate layer, painting over the top of the character to match the background, you would just make another layer mask so that it would be erasing it instead. But with the layer mask, obviously not getting rid of it completely. So here I'm just doing more blood work and shading, adding a lot more detail there, adding a bit more color to this guy on the back, the skull, and I've added a bit more of the flesh as well. So, once you've got your base plate, if you want to call it that, you can also just, add new elements and have fun, because, it's always great to add more things as well. So here what I've done is I've done another overlay layer, and this is just to get a bit more of the form happening. So I've just added a bit of black to the bottom here while adding a bit of white exposure to the top, just so that you can see a bit more of the dynamic kind of contrast there. And this layer here, layer 22, he is for this shadow here, which is to give a shadow to the scythe that's lower to the ground. You just got to think about light and form, and like where if things close to the ground, then it's obviously going to have a bit more of a shadow. Then it's okay to have its own separate shadow instead of just being a circular gradient. So yeah, I'm still playing around with this arm here. I'm giving another shadow here to the arm itself. Alright, and then here's a lot of drippy stuff and a bit of highlighting. And then here is some of the blood work. So I use a lot of blood brushes and stuff from the internet, and a lot of splattery kind of brushes and stuff. And then what I'll use is the same kind of technique as the shadow, where you free transform the the graphic kind of pattern of the blood, and then drape it over the shapes that you want it to drip down. Okay, I'm not sure what layer 31 is doing. Sometimes I'll make a layer and then take a break or something and come back and then be like, oh, need to make a new layer. So I'll make two. That's how organized I am. Oops. So this is some white. So I'm getting rid of this weird back section. I think I had the idea that he would have more bones sticking out of his front, but I figured since his butt is on this side, might be a bit too suggestive to have these kind of things sticking out there. Because, you don't want to freak the kids out. A zombie butt is okay, but, zombie dicks coming out the other side, that might be a bit too far. So I got rid of them, and then added some blood splatters. So here's a bunch of blood splatters. These are great for adding a bit of, texture and also a bit of scale to the piece. It's great to, the world is a gritty place, so you've got to, and especially for bleeding zombies and everything, it's great to add lots of blood and effects like that, which are, real world things that we get freaked out by, and then, having things, bleeding and drooling and messy, like they've been into a lot of fights and stuff like that. That's a great way to show, kind of storytelling on a character without giving them, too much, extra stuff to do. Alright, so here is a lot more rendering, and I've added this to a layer mask. So if we disable that, you can see at this stage I still had those strange ribs out the other side of his back, but since that's gone, I just able to get rid of that. And this layer, I'm not sure what this is. Oh, okay, this is a color layer. So if we make this normal and then 100%, you can see here that I've added a lot more, a secondary like contrast color scheme. So I'm having like blue contrast on, like a blue light on one side and red on this one. You know, I'm not sure how well it works, but I just wanted to add more of the more of a wash towards the skin, and it makes it look a bit cooler, like it's dead. Oh, sorry, dead rotting flesh. So yeah, if we, you know, obviously go back to how it was, color on 20%, so it's very low opacity still, but I find it's, you know, it's great to add subtle effects like that, and it really pays off, especially when you scale it down a little bit and make it pop. Anyway, so, and then here what I've got is some more overlay. So when you're doing blood, you can either you know, use splattery brushes with a multiply layer so that it, you know, imprints onto the colors you've already got and dyes them darker, or if you want to make it a bit of a lighter thing, you can make an overlay layer and then put a bit of blood like that as well. And sometimes it's good to use the two. So if you zoom in, if I zoom into the face here, you can see with the overlay it's just added a lot of the red here as well. And then without any of them, you can see the difference there. Blah. 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 Lots of blood. Whoops. Keep zooming out. So yeah, and it is good to work zoomed out like this. I think I was working about this far out and maybe this. Whoops. So I'm just keeping on rendering. I've added a hand on this arm here, and then added some more spine, some more detail to this guy's back, but I'm obviously going to keep this face in the front a lot more detailed than I am the face at the back. I don't think I want to give this guy at the back an eye, because then that would detract from this guy's eyes here. And then adding a bit more darker shadow work. Oh, and then I've given this guy a tooth to try and pop his face out a bit more. Like, his background arm here is very kind of light, so making the tooth dark and the shadowy place of his face there is a great way to make the focal point pop a bit more. I probably should have gotten rid of some of this spine here, because it is very close to the tooth, and it's kind of replicating the line there. So if I were to do this again, I would have made this whole area here a bit lighter to make the face around him pop. But, you know, it's always easy to look back in hindsight and see how you would have done stuff better. So this layer here is just a little levels layer to make it slightly lighter. And then I've gone back in and darkened some areas as well. And I actually make this layer behind the face darker, which is an interesting turn for the worst, if you ask me. See, I should have kept it light and then had this area of his face dark so that it would contrast. But oh well, Austen of the past, what are you doing? So yep, keeping on rendering. I've added a few more veiny details here, as you can see. You know, don't have to go crazy detail all over, but it's good to keep it all up. So here is some subtle highlights of the teeth. Just some white to make it look kind of wet. If you add white highlights to, you know, dripping flesh and all that, it can make it look a lot wet, but it can also make it kind of look, it's a hard balance to find. You know, you don't want to do it to everything, but for instance on this scythe arm here, it's really made the edge pop out and look wet and sharp. Yep, so here I've added, I gave him some more eyes. You know, I mean, I'm nearly done with the piece, but I figured I'd, just have a play to see how it looks. So I drew in some eyes and then decided not to keep them there, so got rid of them. And then here I've added a bit more blood though. Added a lot more blood actually. Always love adding blood. Blood. And then I've also added some blood on the floor. Oh, and it looks like I did add a few little ribs at the back there just to keep the scary rib effect going there. So we're nearly at the end. I had a play and thought about adding a tongue for this guy. Can't actually remember if this was in the final or not. I don't think it was, but sorry if it was. I can't remember. So there's his tongue. Blech. I think I'll leave it out for the moment. So yeah, and then I've got a few adjustment layers here. So this one here is human saturation. I've bumped up the saturation quite a lot, so you can see the difference there. It's gone from quite a grayscale kind of colory piece to quite makes the colors pop a lot more. Then what I've also done is added a a green filter, and that's just brought all the different colors into kind of under one filter. And you get these just by going to this little symbol here and going photo filter, and then you can get a whole bunch of different filters. As you can see, it just slightly adds a tinge to the piece, and it's a good way to color correct or add stuff at the end. Like the violet one there looks pretty good too. I might use that in the future. Deep red, deep purple, deep yellow. Depends what sort of effect you want to go for your piece. And then I'm just adding another layers level, because I find that when you finish your work and export it as a JPEG, it usually comes out a bit darker than you want in Photoshop. But yeah, that also might just be a problem I have with my computer and it being configured incorrectly. But probably not. But anyway. Okay. But anyway, so here's the layer, and then what I usually do is simply add a tag. It's got my website, DeviantArt, and Facebook. When you're putting an image on the web, it's always good to put your name on it somewhere. I'm quite excessive here with all three, and it probably would have been alright to just have the website, but I feel like as it's a line at the bottom, it helps the composition, and I get a bit anal about trying to protect my images on the web, but once you put something on the web, it's kind of hard for people to see it as an artwork and not just another random image that belongs to everyone. So just if you put your name somewhere on it, at least someone will find the rest of your art. So then I think that's just a little texture, and then I've just added a signature there. So there's my signature. And finding a good place to put the watermark and the signature sometimes takes a long time. Anyway, I think the only other thing here was the Dead Space logo, but I started off putting it there, but I've previously decided to take it off just because I think it's a cool monster, but why limit it to Dead Space? It could work in any kind of monster science fiction world, and also I don't want to get in trouble with the Dead Space police. Alright guys, so hope you enjoyed this Photoshop walkthrough. Here's a look at his nice gob for you guys, and let me know if you want to see more of these in future. It's more of a chilled kind of video that I get to talk freely about how much I want. When I do the speed painting process videos and try and do commentary on them, I'm always trying to keep up with it and sometimes get rushed, so it's good to just go through it like this as well. Anyway, thanks guys, hope you have a good day, and all the best. Cheers. Well, oops, does turn out that I did finish it with the tongue, so there you go, buddy. There you go. You can have your tongue back, you bastard. Okay, I'm done now. Bye.